Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. When ineffective parents and antisocial bullies mistreat somebody like Caroline, they commit a wrong against society. It is an insidious violation. The form that the damage takes is not in those parents and those bullies directly doing something dramatic and violent, but rather the person they targeted expressing that hurt and pain in a violent manner. So that person absorbs all this damage, and then they push it out to other people. The victim carries the pain with them only to have that pain manifest at a later time. That is the mechanism of the harm. It goes from the parents and bullies to the victim and then back out to someone else. Someone like Rachel, a person who never hurt anybody. In this way, neglecting, teasing, and bullying are toxins that not only poison the intended target, but then they go on to poison others. All of society pays for those crimes in the form of this chain reaction. 3 ways that one could describe a childhood with a narcissistic mother. These themes are incompetent childhood, isolated childhood, and denied childhood. As I go through these themes, I'll include quotes directly from the participants. These quotes were included in that article. So let's look at each of these 3 themes, starting with incompetent childhood. This theme can be broken down into 3 elements: nullification, demonstration of power, and shame. Here we see the daughter is never appreciated. She was never shown gratitude. She never heard the words, "thank you." She never received support or encouragement. The mother could not make a mistake, but the only thing the daughter could do is make mistakes. Activities that the daughter chose to do, or values that she attempted to form, were designated as silly. The daughter's hopes and wishes would not be tolerated, and she starts to think of herself as an extension of the mother. "I have tried to deserve my existence by being useful." Right? A very sobering quote there. "Somehow my mother sensed my weakness and insecurity." I've seen this many times in my clinical experience where this is how someone feels in that situation. And she would always create arguments that she could win. I find this was interesting because this really shows how the narcissist creates the situation on the battlefield. They fight when they want to fight under the circumstances that they have designated. It gives them a marked advantage when it comes to winning these arguments. The mother determines what is permitted. Whether the daughter follows the mother's instructions or not, the daughter was always wrong. The continual expression of dissatisfaction is all the daughter gets to see. Now notice there's really no way here for the daughter to win. Compliance or rebellion lead to the same conclusion. The daughter is trapped, right? There aren't many variables that she has control over. There may be no variables that she can control. The daughter may be humiliated by the mother in front of others. The mother cannot regulate her behavior. Her use of power rises to the level of cruelty. The mother did not seem to be able to establish good boundaries, and her behavior was erratic. This speaks to the no safe place to churn idea that we see with these situations. Again, the daughter is really trapped. The mother is not stable, not reliable, and the daughter never knows what to expect. So a narcissist blames their children, and really everybody, for how their life turned out. Shame is the last component of the incompetent childhood experience. This is considered to be a product of the demonstration of power and the nullification. So shame is like the result. The daughters were ashamed because they couldn't do anything right, and they felt like they had no value. They formed an identity based on inferiority, weakness, worthlessness, ineffectiveness, and imperfection. I felt ashamed of just existing. I tried to be non-existent and obedient. A sad commentary about the effects of the narcissistic parent. Now moving to the isolated childhood. This theme has 3 components: dependence, blaming, and the last component is envy and creating a shiny facade. Here we see the mother can blame the daughter for anything with no reason or logic behind it. So again, this one's fairly direct. The quotes here: "My mother was a master of finding someone to blame afterwards, and I still do not know when she is telling the truth." Right? So this is interesting. I've seen this many times too, where the individual who had the narcissistic parent grows up and they never are able to establish trust for that parent. Right? They just don't know when the parent is being truthful. They don't know if they're trying to manipulate. The relationship never really stabilizes and becomes secure. So this takes me to the third component of the isolated childhood, envy and creating a shiny facade. The harsh reality of the misery the daughter experienced really juxtaposes sharply against the ideal fantasy that the mother projects to other people. The daughter was not allowed to be happy unless that happiness was related to the mother, right? Unless that happiness helped make the mother look better or made the mother happy. Quotes here, "My parents were respected and trusted in their work, therefore no one could imagine what kind of nightmare my life was." Right, so this goes back to that familiar theme of the daughter being trapped. The daughter has no options. This really adds to it by indicating that the daughter has no way to even be recognized. So it's beyond being trapped. She can't even communicate with other people and explain how her situation cannot be changed. Right, so no one's going to empathize with the daughter. This brings me to the last theme, denied childhood. We see here three components: violence, threatening, and rejecting. Starting with violence. Well, this one's fairly straightforward. The mother would often use violence as a way to punish the daughter. Absolutely no provocation was required. A quote here, "My mother really hits us with a stick and hand. The daughter lived in constant fear of making the mother angry." Constant terror, constant fear in the situation for the daughter. The next component is rejection. The daughter has never had basic safety. The mother forgot her, ignored her, and left her alone. The mother offered no protection, and sometimes this will allow others to mistreat the daughter. So here we see even more pain, right? So the daughter has to worry about the mother, and now she has to worry about the mother's lack of protection, right? Mothers typically protect their daughters. We don't see this with the narcissistic mother. Constantly being in fear, especially as a child, leads to a lot of suffering later on, as well as suffering in that moment. What types of outcomes would we see with each of these three themes? Well, all three lead to shame. Now, in general, incompetent childhood leads to feelings of inferiority and worthlessness. Isolated childhood, this turns the daughter against other people and focuses her toward her mother. We also see hypervigilance as a consequence here. Denied childhood leads to a sense of insecurity and feelings of fear. In general, people who are raised by narcissists, including daughters raised by narcissistic mothers, are more likely to have insecure attachment, which places them at a greater risk of developing psychopathology. So that's how we kind of look at the pathway to mental disorder in this situation. Insecure attachment contributes to it. So when I think of the mother-daughter dynamic, and this could apply to a variety of dynamics, but specifically with this dynamic, we see this image, this analogy of two trees, right? The mother is a tree, the daughter is a smaller tree. As the daughter, this tree grows up, we would hope the tree would grow straight and would be resistant, right? So when the wind blows, the tree wouldn't bend too much. And what we see here with these two trees is that the mother is pulling that smaller tree, the daughter, either into her as that tree grows or away from her. If the daughter tree, so to speak, is curved away, now that tree is isolated. It's not necessarily better for the daughter one way or the other, too close to the mother or too far away. Sometimes people say to children of narcissists, why don't you just straighten up, right? To use the tree analogy, why don't you just straighten up? Well, because the individual grew in that direction. In real life, of course, it's not the curvature of a tree, but a cognitive distortion. And that's something that counseling can help to address. So this analysis of these themes about the narcissistic mother really underscore the importance of promoting education about the destructiveness of narcissism. It causes harm at every level, but the narcissistic parent wreaks havoc that has the potential to lead to a lifetime of suffering. Fortunately, counseling can help many who are in this situation. So what we see from the research literature in terms of narcissism and being a father is that higher levels of narcissism in fathers are associated with the tendency to poorly fulfill parental functions. Narcissistic fathers typically aren't considered good fathers in the way most people would define the word good. But when a daughter is raised by a narcissistic father, she may not believe that during that time period. So she may believe her father is good. We see a wide range of behaviors here, from over-involved to completely distant. So we would say narcissistic possessiveness all the way to narcissistic indifference. The daughter's emotional needs are not attended to. The daughter isn't allowed to have an independent personality or to express her feelings. The narcissistic father does not focus on emotional needs, but that doesn't mean there's a lack of focus altogether. The narcissistic father lives vicariously through the daughter. The father needs the daughter to succeed. When the daughter fails, the father's embarrassed. He's disappointed and ashamed. And these feelings drive the father to revenge. He takes revenge out on the daughter, usually in the form of humiliation. He wants to make the daughter suffer as he suffered with that failure. The narcissistic father will be perceived by others as being extremely caring, somebody willing to sacrifice for his daughter, do anything for his family. Other people may even wish they had a father like the narcissistic father, which can affect the daughter in really two main ways. It can reinforce that her father is really doing a good job, that he's great, or it can be disgusting to her that other people don't see the true nature of her father. When she tries to criticize people for liking her father, they often turn against her, call her ungrateful, and this leaves the daughter with a sense of isolation, this feeling that nobody really understands her. The daughter learns not to criticize her father, and this attitude really stays with her throughout her life, potentially. Sign number 5 is a distorted view of value. So the narcissistic father does not really respect the daughter for who she is, but rather he tries to create his own version of the daughter that he can then respect. The father does not truly see the daughter's value. He sees only what he wants to see. For example, if the daughter was interested in playing a musical instrument, perhaps she had a talent for it, the narcissistic father may dismiss that. He might say, "You'll never be famous, respected, or loved for playing an instrument." And of course that's not necessarily true, but that's really what the narcissistic father is saying, because he has another agenda. So in essence, the father's daughter is his redemption, his opportunity to make things right. So there will be important, emotionally significant moments where the father is there. Graduations, birthday parties, other social gatherings, where the father is attentive because other people are watching. He creates good memories for the daughter, times when she felt loved and appreciated. The narcissistic father can manipulate and use his superficial charm to really make these times special. So again, the narcissistic father can be really important in terms of forming these memories. He can be essentially good at forming these memories. And the daughter will have to rely on these memories during times when the father is distant. Sign number 7 is blaming the mother for the perceived flaws of the father. So we hear things from the daughter like, the mother really didn't appreciate the father for who he was. The mother didn't understand how great the father was. The father could have reached his full potential if he wasn't weighed down by the mother. The mother wasn't emotionally attentive to the father, didn't let him be himself, didn't let him have his own identity. The mother drove the father away. Now, all this is understandable, all these different thoughts of the daughter, because the narcissistic father complains to the daughter about the mother, maybe even going so far as telling the daughter she shouldn't be like the mother. So he's more or less pushing the daughter to take sides. The daughter may view her mother as a competitor for the affection and approval of the father. So if a daughter had a narcissistic father, what should she do if there are problems that stem from that? Well, I would say seek counseling. A counselor may focus on helping the daughter to form her own identity, determine her own goals and values, which could lay the foundation for other therapeutic progress.
Joyce invalidated the feelings of her daughter. She manipulated her, demeaned her, and expected too much from her. Joyce taught Karen how to be just like her. She instructed her in the ways of manipulation and callousness. Perhaps Joyce taught her daughter too well. Karen never had anybody that she could count on. She felt isolated from her mother and abandoned by her father because Joyce pushed him away. When Karen became old enough to date, this opened up a wide range of people who could support her. When she found Dennis, they connected right away. Dennis paid attention to Karen. This is something she desperately wanted. Margot Kidder would describe her mood swings as being capable of knocking over a building. She hid the disorder from other people. She thought having a child might cure the disorder, and she self-medicated with drugs and alcohol. This is an extremely common approach. She was sensation-seeking, impulsive, deceptive, and lacked empathy. She had a sense of entitlement. She was envious and manipulated people. With all this in mind, here's how one may conceptualize a case like this. We get this picture of someone who has a lot of interest in romantic relationships, but not much in the way of an ability to maintain those relationships. Romance is both a source of joy and pain. The individual cannot make peace with that. There's no way to reconcile relationships because stability and a sense of satisfaction are difficult to realize. They cannot find or are unwilling to find security in the relationship. They experience the passionate love, otherwise known as infatuation, but they do not experience the consummate love, which is known as complete love. There is no depth to the romance. Furthermore, if the relationship does move away from infatuation and starts to become meaningful, the individual takes that as a sign that something went terribly wrong. They cannot accept the relationship becoming satisfactory or positive. So it's either negative, satisfactory, or positive. If it's satisfactory or positive, they're not happy with that. And of course, if it's negative, that is not pleasant. So there's really no way the relationship can work. As this is going on, the individual seeks attention. They want to be thought of as attractive. They want to feel loved, but really no matter what they do, they don't feel that way. Frustrated, they start to go to extremes to capture that love, including harming themselves. Normally, an individual with BPD would be a danger to themselves and perhaps a danger to others to some degree, but not a pronounced threat to others. But what happens if someone with BPD is also psychopathic? Now, in addition to the unstable relationship pattern, we see a lack of empathy and remorse, someone who is manipulative, and a person who has no concerns about being deceptive. Essentially, psychopathy removes all the safeties that we would normally see with an individual with only BPD. Now, with the psychopathy added, anything's possible for that individual. Moral restrictions have been removed. Therefore, homicide, even multiple homicides, can be acceptable, according to their thinking, because it helps them to address the demands of the BPD, like seeking pleasure in relationships and avoiding pain from those same relationships. If one were to add narcissism on top of this, we then see a sense of superiority, which further justifies this idea that the offender can do whatever they want. They deserve romance. It doesn't matter if people have to die. The only thing that matters is them. It's complete self-centeredness.
So again, there's concern over the personal nature of the attacks of a narcissist. But are they personal? Does the narcissist really know what they're doing? In some sense, of course, the answer is yes. They know right from wrong. They know that their behavior causes pain. But in another sense, they don't really understand the motivations behind their own behavior. They really don't understand why they're doing it at a deep down level. Narcissists victimize people for a variety of reasons, but none of them have to do with carefully evaluating the substance of a person and making a judgment based on that. And this would really be required for somebody to attack another personally. Narcissists go out of their way to make it seem like it's personal, but they don't have the assessment capabilities to understand who you are as a person in the first place. In a sense, one of the skills the narcissist has is to attack somebody and make that person believe that it's personal when it's not. So another thing to consider here is just because somebody is a narcissist, that doesn't mean they can't genuinely love somebody. It just means that the person is likely to come second to the narcissist, right? You'll never be number one with a narcissist because that slot's already taken. Love and manipulation can also occur at the same time, right? This is something I think a lot of people don't think of. Just because somebody's destructive and manipulative doesn't mean they can't also love. So sometimes what we see is the reason that somebody leaves a relationship with a narcissist isn't because the narcissist failed to love. It's because of all the manipulation, the harm, the toxicity, and the destruction. The lesson here is this: boundary crossing is not okay. Perpetrators often start with small boundary violations and then move to more significant violations once two people are intertwined. Once we see financial dependence, emotional dependence, friends and family look at the couple as happy, and the victim doesn't want to disappoint them. So the perpetrator is manipulative. They put the person in a position where leaving is difficult. There's no sense in having boundaries if there are no consequences to violating them.
Counseling can help perpetrators, but a person has to want to recover. They have to want to make changes. That's the real problem. Narcissistic people are very resistant to change because they don't have insight or empathy. Changing people is challenging. Putting up with the violence is not a good idea. No positive emotion like love, affection, passion, excitement, or comfort can outweigh high levels of anger, immaturity, narcissism, or low levels of empathy and insight. People can and should be disagreeable at times, but there is no need to violate boundaries. If a person cannot control their behavior when disagreeing, their ability to reason should be questioned. Emotions and reason cannot both be in control at the same time. It has to be exhausting to be that argumentative all the time. At some point, one has to ask oneself, why am I being combative? It can't always be the fault of the police or other people. Sometimes it pays to look inward to find the answers about the causes of behavior.
Hurting people is really an important part of the mission. So the next item here is gaslighting. And gaslighting we see with really all levels of narcissism, but the type of gaslighting I see with malignant narcissism is a little bit different. It's really planned over the long run. So the way I kind of see this gaslighting component with malignant narcissism is it kind of starts with really a delusional belief on the part of the malignant narcissist. It's a criticism, and it's a criticism they may believe, that would make it kind of delusional, or it's a criticism that they're putting in place but they know it's not true, and that's really kind of self-deception or just plain lying. They're just lying to everybody. So they start with this delusional belief, this criticism of another person, and they maintain it and build on it. I mentioned this before. So the attacks are really not random, they're rather thematic. So there's a pattern to them. So they'll start with some defect in another person, some defect they think is there, or again, they're going to say is there when it's not there. And they're going to take that defect and look at all the possible ways to express that that person has the defect, all the criticisms consistent with pointing that out. And they're going to really just come back to that over and over in different ways. They're going to hit that defect, whether it's real or not, from a number of different angles over a long period of time, which does really a more effective job in convincing somebody that they're actually the problem. So the person who has the gaslighting behavior directed toward them, they believe that they're the problem. That's what gaslighting is, when somebody tries to convince you you're the problem when you're not. But because it's planned over the long run, and because it sticks to a pattern, again, it's much more effective. So the malignant narcissist does a better job at convincing people that they're the problem, that the other person is the problem, and that there's nothing wrong with the malignant narcissist. Now looking at antisocial personality disorder, so we're moving to ClusterB, personality pathology. With antisocial, we see impulsivity, sensation-seeking, and boredom, right? So these are strongly associated with that disorder. We see person A playing the victim. A failure to accept responsibility for behavior can be a part of this, even when person A is clearly responsible for a specific wrongdoing. Now moving to narcissistic personality disorder, NPD. So with NPD on the physical side, typically this rejection is planned and it's executed because person A has lost control of person B. So the manipulation tactics are no longer successful, or person A identifies a new romantic partner that they believe has a higher level of status. That's important to someone who's narcissistic. If property division is a factor in the dissolution of the relationship, person A is going to want more than their share. With emotional, this disorder is associated with the highest level of emotional rejection and harm out of all of the personality disorders, although it's arguable with borderline personality disorder at the extreme devaluation stage. But either way, in general, kind of over the course of the relationship, NPD probably causes the most harm. We see a number of malicious behaviors here with the emotional rejection, manipulation in many forms, including person A recruits allies against person B, sometimes referred to as flying monkeys. We see spreading rumors, playing the victim, vicious, unhelpful criticizing, emotional invalidation. We see false allegations, gaslighting, so person A trying to convince person B that person B is the problem, trying to restrict the freedom of person B, so a lot of control tactics, and never taking responsibility. Person B may not leave the relationship because person A continually asks for forgiveness, they promise to change, they perform grand gestures to prove their love, and they beg person B not to leave, right? So there's a lot of reasons why person B might stay in that relationship with person A. Moving over to borderline personality disorder, on the physical side, what really stands out here with physical rejection is that it's often followed by acceptance. So we see an idealization, devaluation pattern. We see an on-again, off-again type of relationship. This also occurs with the emotional rejection. We see devaluation, playing the victim, false accusations, criticism, anger, and aggression, followed by emotional acceptance. Person A proclaiming that person B is the best thing that ever happened to them, right? So we see, again, kind of this stark difference between the behavior in maybe 1 week and the behavior in another week. Now, person B can develop emotional numbness from this. It's somewhat common, but it's often described more as just being tired. Person B might love person A, but they just can't deal with the ups and downs of the relationship.
Laura's behavior aligns with a number of borderline and histrionic personality characteristics, not necessarily the personality disorders. Rather, I'm talking about the traits of these personality types. From borderline, Laura had a fear of abandonment and was impulsive, like when she murdered her boyfriend in 1982 for breaking up with her. From histrionic, Laura had a desire to be the center of attention, used her physical appearance to attract attention. It appears as though Laura perceived women as competitors and felt as though her romantic relationship with David was under threat. Laura was able to build up anger and hatred toward Taylor using her distorted perceptions. When she committed the murder, Laura probably felt like she was protecting her own life, because if David left her, it would feel like she was dying. David initially supported Laura, which exemplifies the power that Laura was able to exert. This also speaks to the power of being with someone who has borderline and histrionic personality traits. Laura was able to maintain a hold on men. For some men, having a partner who is looking for constant reassurance is considered a positive. It makes them feel more secure themselves and makes them feel as though they are in charge of the relationship. In reality, nothing could be further from the truth. One lesson that can be learned from this case is that relationships characterized by manipulation, volatility, and domination often have a gruesome, agonizing, and regrettable conclusion. This is yet another case that speaks to the dangers of narcissism in the context of romantic relationships and the importance of setting boundaries in those relationships. Some people really struggle with denying a narcissist anything that they want. There have been cases where narcissists have stolen thousands of dollars from victims, and the victims just keep giving the narcissist money. There have been cases where narcissists have convinced victims to become conspirators in serious crimes.
The narcissist will take everything they can. If the partner of the narcissist says to them, "I'm going to make you number one in my life," the narcissist will respond, "Hey, that's great. That works out perfectly. I will work to make me number one as well." So a relationship can definitely be one-sided, meaning there can be an investment by only one person. We see this with extreme narcissism. Someone is in a relationship with someone else who has extreme narcissistic traits. So yes, there are technically two people, but there's no reciprocity. The narcissist only cares about himself or herself, and the other person cares about both people in the relationship. So whenever we have narcissism, we have the potential for rage. This is certainly a possibility. When narcissistic rage leads to murder, it is often in the context of a close relationship, like a romantic relationship, in which unresolved conflict causes attachment problems for the perpetrator. The pride of the perpetrator is injured. There's this displacement of emotion onto the victim. It's not really the same thing as anger. Narcissistic rage is distinctive. Anger is goal-directed. It is caused by frustration of purpose. Narcissistic rage is not about overcoming some type of obstacle. Rather, it's an explosive, affective state in response to a perceived injury. Narcissistic rage has the potential to be extremely dangerous. It's an attack without limits. Anger is dangerous, but sometimes people can regulate how much anger they express. Most of the time, people can. Narcissistic rage is harder to control because, in a way, from the point of view of the person in that rage, it is self-defensive. The person is trying to protect their ego. They feel threatened. When somebody is fighting for their life, or they believe they're fighting for their life, they do not worry about using excessive force. They're okay with using all the force they can muster. Now, there are two types of narcissism, grandiose and vulnerable, and the way we think about it is no matter which type somebody primarily has, they can move back and forth between the types. With the grandiose type, we see characteristics like being socially dominant, extroverted, arrogant, and resistant to criticism. This last one's going to be fairly important if we're talking about narcissistic rage. Grandiose is also called overt narcissism. Vulnerable narcissism has characteristics like having a lot of shame, resentfulness, mistrust, and being hypersensitive to criticism. It's sometimes referred to as covert narcissism. So what is narcissistic rage? Well, this is an anger that we observe frequently with people who are highly narcissistic, including many of those who have narcissistic personality disorder. It has both reactive and instrumental components. So what do I mean by this? Well, in the moment when a narcissist is criticized, or whatever triggers the reaction, we see that the anger is sudden, irrational, disproportionate to the level of criticism, and may involve physical gestures or even aggression. So that's the reactive component. But then after this, we see recurrent anger outbursts and a desire to get revenge that can really last a long time. This is the instrumental part. So we have this immediate, reactive, impulsive piece, and then we have kind of a long-term piece. So reactive and instrumental. Now, the reason narcissistic rage happens is because narcissism is essentially the creation of a false self to protect an insecure self. So the false self is the belief that the narcissist has that they are important, special, a person who is entitled to all types of things, a very valuable person by any measure. The fragile sense of self, sometimes called the fragile ego, is that part of the narcissist that recognizes that they are not special. It's insecurity, a sense of vulnerability. It's too painful to directly confront. So the false self, or the false persona, must stay in place to protect the ego from this horrible pain. So when the narcissist is criticized, that challenges the narcissism, that protective part. The narcissist compensates for the criticism through rage. Rage allows the narcissist to keep that false self in place, to maintain their own self-deception. The only person a narcissist really needs to deceive is themselves. They try to deceive others, but again, they only need to lie to themselves. And of course, they need to believe those lies. So let's take a look at the 9 characteristics of narcissistic rage. Number 1, it is typically triggered by criticism. I mentioned this before. And we see certain types of criticism that tend to evoke this rage more so than others. We see criticisms about somebody's personality, like if they have a lack of caring to them, if that part is criticized, or their arrogance is criticized, if they're criticized for being condescending, for lying, being selfish, being greedy. All those could trigger narcissistic rage. Number 2, we see that the rage results in hatred. It's remembered forever. The narcissist tends to hold a grudge, and they presume the criticism was personal. They want the critic to pay for what they did. The third characteristic of narcissistic rage, it happens even when the criticism was fair. When the criticism was worded politely, when it was made in jest, like if somebody is teasing a narcissist. So moving on to number 4, we see that the rage occurs even when the narcissist has a good argument to make. So the narcissist really bypasses any potential good argument in favor of rage and personal attacks. So the rage is rambling and it misses valid counterpoints. You can see how it would be challenging for a narcissist to come with a valid complaint, a valid counterpoint, because they already went into a rage. So this failure to make a good case for oneself when you're criticized, this can really have this effect of people not believing you later on. Now, the fifth point here is because of the rage, the narcissist does miss valuable feedback. So essentially, the rage blocks any type of learning. The rage and the result of the rage leaves the narcissist more confident. It kind of proves to them that they were right all along. People are jealous of me. People just don't understand how great I am. And again, with that type of mentality, they're not really going to learn from any feedback. Item number 6 is that the rage causes more criticism. So somebody is criticized and they have this rage, the narcissistic rage. That can lead to more criticism, which leads to more rage. So really it can create a vicious cycle of criticism and rage. When we look at situations involving narcissism that did escalate to violence, this is something we often see. Number 7, we see when this rage occurs, the narcissist tries to gain allies, to get people to agree with them that the critic was really the problem. So just by getting agreement like this, just this alone, can help the narcissist put the protective barrier back over that fragile sense of self. So they're always really seeking somebody to take their side, to appreciate how badly they were treated. And at some point, because these people that the narcissist approaches are afraid of the narcissist, they could use this as an opportunity to build a relationship with the narcissist, and may even become what we sometimes refer to as flying monkeys. That's a reference from The Wizard of Oz. So that means they will essentially become agents of the narcissist. So it's interesting because the narcissist more or less recruits these agents, sometimes anyway, because of the narcissistic rage. So they have this rage in response to criticism, and they go out and they look for allies, and then they use those people, they manipulate those people to do their work for them, of criticizing that original critic. The 8th characteristic of narcissistic rage, we see the insulted narcissist is always on the offense and never on the defense. Typically when a person is criticized, they defend themselves or they accept some or all of their criticism. But the narcissist goes on the offense. They attack. It sidesteps that original criticism and attacks the character of the critic. So they introduce criticisms of their own that distract away from the original feedback about them. It's just the way the narcissist functions. The narcissist needs to protect themselves, and this is how they do it. So moving on to number 9, this is the last characteristic I'll cover here of narcissistic rage. We see the rage happens in or contributes to a vulnerable state. I mentioned before that a lot of times narcissists fluctuate between grandiose and vulnerable states, between those two types of narcissism. And with the grandiose, of course, we have a resistance to criticism, so somebody shouldn't go into a rage because they're criticized if they have grandiose characteristics. And with the vulnerable, we see a hypersensitivity to criticism, so it makes more sense that somebody would go into a rage with that type of narcissism. So this fluctuation between these two types of narcissism really kind of makes sense when we think about how those types work. Somebody would really need to be moving toward a vulnerable state in order to have the rage. So can somebody with grandiose narcissism ever go into a rage? Absolutely they could. But in a sense, it's really a manifestation of a vulnerable state. The criticism can activate a vulnerable part and help move that person from grandiose to vulnerable. When the rage is over and any thoughts of revenge or anything like that is over, the narcissist will move back to the grandiose state. So the grandiose state is not necessarily written in stone. Every narcissist is somewhere between vulnerable and grandiose, and it would be unlikely that somebody would be 100% one type or the other. Flying monkeys are essentially agents of the narcissist, people that carry out requests or sometimes orders made by the narcissist. Sometimes because they have to, some because they want to, so they may be sadistic or share the same goal as the narcissist, and some because they are manipulated into doing so. Now in clinical practice, I use the term agents instead of flying monkeys, and there are a few reasons for this. So you may be thinking that one of the reasons is because I tend to avoid colloquial terms. And this is correct, but there's actually a couple other reasons as well. The main reason I use agents instead of flying monkeys is the age of the reference. So the flying monkey reference goes back to the movie The Wizard of Oz that was released in 1939, and you could even say further back to a book written in 1900, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Now the last reason I use agents instead of the term flying monkey is because in the movie, the 1939 movie, The Wizard of Oz, the winged monkeys didn't talk, and it wasn't clear why they followed orders. The orders issued by the Wicked Witch of the West. So intent is really an important facet of the narcissistic agent construct. So when the narcissist uses flying monkeys or agents, what do the agents do? So they can just generally support the narcissist, so they can be on the side of the narcissist, loyal to them despite the destructive nature of narcissism. They can echo the message of the narcissist, so they can act in furtherance of gaslighting. So they can say the same thing as the narcissist to manipulate the narcissist, usually romantic partner, into believing that they're the problem. So the romantic partner will believe that they are the problem. So this is really gaslighting by proxy. They can spread rumors about the narcissist partner, and this makes the narcissist seem more credible because now more than one person is saying the same lie. But also it makes the partner of the narcissist feel like they have less worth, right? Rumors are damaging, which of course is something that narcissists typically want to happen to their partner. They want their partners to feel like they have less value, like they're worthless. By putting the partner down, the narcissist feels like they're moving up. The agents can simply be sent to harass or demean a partner of the narcissist. Sometimes these behaviors aren't really complex, so they can just go and harass somebody and cause trouble directly like that. They can be sent to encourage you to make up with the narcissist, like after an argument. So they might say, hey, give them another chance. They're really not a bad person. They're really not narcissistic. It was a big misunderstanding. So really kind of trying to negotiate on behalf of the narcissist. Now, interestingly, they can also be sent to support you around the same goal of the narcissist. So they can seem like they're on your side. They give you somebody to talk to vent to about the bad behavior of the narcissist, but really they still have the same agenda in mind, which of course they share with the narcissist. So in essence, they can be sent to make peace. They can also be sent to apologize, something narcissists typically have a lot of trouble doing directly, but they may do by proxy. So the agent might come off very convincing, remorseful, kind of all the characteristics you wish you could see in the partner that's narcissistic. Another way, of course, you could look at it is by the narcissist using an agent to do that work. That's very destructive and not good communication. So there's two ways to look at this particular type of manipulation. Similarly, I've also seen agents sent in situations where the narcissist has been cut off by the partner in a more dramatic and definitive way. So the victim says they won't communicate with the narcissist anymore. There's no talking at all. And here's where you'll see the agent show up, kind of out of nowhere. Agents tend to be sent right after that type of decision is made. Now, agents can do other things as well. These are just some of the common behaviors I've seen for the agent.